The condition is really crazy condition.
And that shouldn't give away the whole secret to professional windsurfing.
Marcilio giving Antoine elbow a run for his body. Here we go. What a finish!
The guy is kind of talking bullshit.
The team's just got to work a little harder.
Welcome to the Windsurfing Podcast, back again for episode 31. And this week, we're going to be talking to one of the top coaches in the world, the main man behind Team MPG. Yes, this was a group that was set up in the probably late 90s, early 2000s. Had some big riders in there. Jason Polakow, Robbie Swift was involved. We saw Francisco Goya obviously securing that world title as part of this Team MPG. So we're going to be talking to the coach behind it. We're going to talk about mental toughness, fitness. We're going to talk about routines, traveling, different techniques. We're going to be talking about all of that and how he, in fact, found windsurfing in the first place. Who is it? Well, it is, of course, Scott Sanchez.
Scott, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to have you.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would ask you how you are, but I saw your Instagram, like a birthday pic with 62 and squatting like 300 pounds. So I guess you're okay. I guess you're doing okay.
Yeah. I still gotta move the steel, keep up with the guys, you know?
Yeah. Is that important for you? That whatever you're giving to the guys, you can actually do yourself?
Well, yeah, with the exception of those waves.
Yeah. Even like I saw you use those stroboscope glasses that you know mix up your coordination. So you put on those and you do the Lenny 360s and all that stuff as well.
On the ground.
Yeah.
Fun.
I didn't know where to start. There's so much to talk about. So let's start with your background. You are a successful skier, an Olympic skier, and it's the exact opposite, pretty much, sport of windsurfing in terms of, you know, winter, summer, very structured, very professional to very free flowing, very, you know what I mean? Is that something that attracted you, or you just happened to step into windsurfing for?
I think there was a couple of things after Sarajevo, the Olympics in '84. I was offered a position to help facilitate and start a ski academy. They had already had a few months into it. I was working with a Swedish coach, and so basically I retired. And I could have gone on a little bit longer, I think, but there were some personal things that were going on, and I just made the decision to do that. And when you're fully committed for a whole lifetime to something, and all of a sudden it's not there, it's a very strange sensation. And I had seen windsurfing, and I thought, wow, that looks pretty fun. So I pursued that, and I actually went to San Francisco, and there was a World Cup going on there at Crissy Field. And I saw that, and I thought that looks like something I really want to get into. And time would come to pass within a year that I met my wife of 35, 36 years now. And she was a world champion, and she was going through the evolution of the sport, and it was changing from the windsurfer class to the professional division. And so we started a relationship, and that's kind of how I got into it. And then I saw how people were approaching, the preparation and that kind of thing. And it was pretty, there were a lot of opportunities. So
how is that? How was that in contrast to skiing back in the day, which was probably already quite developed in the strength and conditioning?
Well, there was a lot of structure in the competition, but in the days leading up to the competition or the months in the preparation of it, people didn't train, they sailed. Activity, I'm sure each person had their own thing, whether they did pull-ups or chin-ups or things like that, but there was just a lot of opportunity that I saw for people to make great gains that would translate into great gains on the water. And then, of course, to have the predictability to be able to pull the trigger for a performance. You know, a lot of people can be unbelievable athletes and great in their sport, but to be able to perform on demand on any given day, oftentimes finals are won in really subpar conditions, whether it's in wave sailing or at the end of the day when tide is going out and water gets flatter, or in slalom racing, you know, it might have been just hammering all day long, and then it could get really gusty or really holy. And so to work in those conditions, most people are like, nah, it's too small. Nah, it's not windy enough. Nah, it's too light. And so as we started going in that direction, I have hundreds of stories of, you know, the learning curve of it. So yeah, a lot of fun.
So then what? So then your wife is kind of your first
guinea pig. Yeah, she. I remember one time that we were in Hood River, and there was a they called it the Pro-Am, and it was kind of a stop for the PWA Tour, PBA. I guess it was PBA at that time, and it was a slalom race. And in the days leading up, the sail size, the kind of the popular size was the 5.7, and then it just started hammering. And in those days, everybody was using a weight vest, and I kept pushing her. In the day before, it got to be like 3.5 weather. I mean, it was just like in Hood River, they called it, it's nuking. It was basically smoke on the water. And you could have those kind of winds at the event site, which was the marina where the competition was held. It wasn't often, but it could be that windy there. In other parts of the river, you definitely had those conditions, but not that often there. And in preparation for it, we kept having to go and test stuff because, you know, you've got everything dialed in, and all of a sudden the conditions change and you haven't worked in those things. And so I was like, no, you got to try this fin. No, you got to try this sail. And the last time she came out and she just, bam, she got pasted so hard. And then she came back and her face was all swollen and she was mad. And she was like, God, don't make me fucking go out there again. And you know, she was pretty pissed. And, I said, well, okay, but you got to go back out there because you need to try this fin. If it's this windy, you need to know. And I picked her up by the lapels of the thing, and I was like, just go and do it. And I turned her around, and she went out, and she couldn't have gone more than 400 yards, and the thing cavitated, and it just landed so hard. I was like, this isn't going to go very well. So anyway, she came back, and I said, okay, well, we tested it. We know it doesn't work. And then the next day it turned out to be 5.0, 5.7, and she went on to win finally. So that was a fun time. So
it worked. Look, honey.
Yeah, it worked. Yeah. There was so many times of you know, whether we did conditioning training or we did preparation and kind of strategizing which races to go to, which ones not to go to, and those sort of things. And I don't think there wasn't that kind of structure except at the event. You know, people are like, okay, I got to be serious now. I got all my gear, got them all lined up, everybody's ready. But there were very few that were doing it that way. So
what do you think it is? Because, I mean, of course, all sports evolve. All sports get a lot more professional. I mean, team sports, they don't, you know, drink beers at halftime anymore and whatever. Like
I think it's just maturity and accountability, and it takes a poster child or two to dedicate themselves, and somebody go, oh, you know what, this guy's really come up really fast.
But do you think windsurfing, because it's so complex and so weather dependent, it's so much harder to put a structure if you're in a place that's iffy with wind or whatever?
No, not at all. It's like you know, you have a football field or a tennis court or a basketball. It's everything universal. It's exactly the same length on each direction. And in sports like skateboarding, skiing, alpine skiing, you know, figure skating, I don't know, there's all kinds of, everything is, you have so many different variables. So I don't really think that had anything to do with it at all. It was just
culture.
The type of, yeah, exactly. The culture and the type of influences that could produce the results that people wanted to get. You know, I mean, if somebody was like, no, you can't have, I remember I had a team called the Gorge Junior team that I started in, when was that? I think that was in the late 80s. And Micah was on that team, and there were a couple other guys that came through. Chris Wyman, they would come and spend the summer. And that was the only time, because I was coaching national teams at the time, and I only had like 8 to 12 weeks, and I would be available. So I kind of hopped back and forth between ski racing and doing that. And we had Anders come, and I said, okay, Anders, you want to talk to the guys, you know, and just give them some tips and stuff. And at that time, it was like, no goals, just this, just go have fun and this kind of thing. And I think that for some people, that works. There's no right or wrong. You have to find out what works best for you. You know, and I have athletes that my job was to keep them from getting into trouble. My job was to keep them from having their friends spend all their money. Others were to push them. Others were to manage them. Others were to give them huge amount of feedback. Others were to teach them how to compete. And so you can't have one single approach as to how to get the best out of each individual. You know, you can work together as a team, but how you resonate with each athlete has to be different. Now, I think there are very few people that have been fortunate. I consider myself to be very fortunate to work with athletes for over a 30-year period. I mean, Micah and I, we've known each other and worked with each other for 36 years. That's how long it was, you know? So it was kind of from a dictatorship to a coaching thing, and then a management, and then a real partnership there. And I have that same kind of relationship with Kai, because we've been together since he was like 11 or something. So it's been a long time, and we have, as the coach, as the feedback loop, I have to make the adjustments. You know, I have to allow the athlete to sometimes make mistakes. I remember we had a top junior that was unbelievable, and I was like, well, he fell in love with this one board, and he's like, I have to use this board, and it's got to be the board. And I was just like, do I want to use this one event, this kind of pinnacle event, to teach him a lesson? And I was thinking, it's just too expensive a lesson. And I just grabbed the board and I said, no, you're not using this. That's a fantasy. Use this board. And that was one of the few times where I really just pulled the plug. But he was young enough that it was the right thing to do, because the win was more important to his head for the future than the lesson in the long run. So,
of course. Yeah. As you say, it's very individual. Even guys that you have to remind them to actually have fun and not overwork themselves and whatever. So it's
I mean, that's you miss the plot, because oftentimes I you know, it doesn't matter what motivates you. Do you want to be on the magazine cover? Do you want to beat your best friend? Do you have a rivalry? To me, it doesn't matter, but you have to tell me what it is and be okay with that. And then that will change over the course of the time. That'll change. I've had athletes that are, you know, they're real altruistic. I don't know what do you call it? Just very much like, oh, I just want to have the perfect run. And somebody else, forget that. I just want to friggin' win, you know. And it doesn't matter to me, but I need to know what it is so I can kind of stoke that fire. And then you see it kind of fade out, and then it shifts to something else, whether it's a rivalry, like I said, or whether it's monetary, or whether it's a repeat, meaning another win after a win, that kind of thing. So I think it's really important that as the coach, you know, our job is to be a mirror to the athlete. Yeah. And some of those things I have to show you, look, this is what you really are doing. And that can be shown in a video, or it can be in the dialogue that we have, or it can be in what you don't know about yourself, or the opportunities that you don't even know exist. You know, oftentimes athletes get really, really good, and they have paid this much attention to some of the details. And I just go, do you realize how good you are and how little you've done, but how amazing the results you've got?
Yeah. So it sounds like it actually starts that it has to be the whole package, and it actually starts with the mental part, with knowing who you are, what you want to accomplish, setting goals, because you've probably been widely regarded as the the kind of strength and conditioning coach, but one doesn't go without the other, does it?
Yeah, I mean, straight up, I don't have any certifications in any of those things. But what I do have a certification is in world champions. And I have counsel in all those corners. I'm not a personal strength coach, or I'm not a personal strength coach. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a biomechanic certified. I'm not a psychologist or a sports psychologist, but I have my hands and my fingers in all of those areas. And at the end of the day, for me, bottom line's a finish line. And that's where I have a lot of fun. And the athletes that I work with, some of them, they don't want to go there because the fear of losing, because they gave a full commitment, they kind of have to mature into. And then they realize that, hey, you know what? Winning is fun. I've had athletes that no, if I win, that means somebody else loses, and I don't want to make them feel bad. Yeah, it's true. And I'm talking about guys that are like up here. And I'm like, well, I can guarantee you they're not thinking like that. And once you have a taste of what it's like to have a personal excellence with a whole group of others on any given day, I think your appetite will change for something different. So
feels good. Definitely feels good.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. So you mentioned Micah Buzianis, sorry.
Yeah.
So that was kind of your, you mentioned the gorge, that junior team you did, and me and Micah in the gorge there. And who pushed who to, like, was it Micah like, hey, I see results here, let's do it more seriously, let's do it full time? Or was it you telling him, hey kid, you have tremendous potential, why don't we work full time?
Well, if I go back a little bit, we actually met in a little town outside of Salt Lake City called Tooele. And Micah was a farm boy. His dad was out there, and there was a little lake called Rush Lake. And in the ski academy years, there was a ski academy called Romar Ski Academy. And Rhonda actually came and left the LA area, moved in with me, and we would go out to this lake because you'd get these thunderheads that would come through, and the wind would just blast through this valley. And we would go out there and we would sail. And then there was this gentleman who had an old ambulance, and that was Micah's dad, Jay. And then Micah would come out, and he had legs. I got pictures of him. He had legs that were about this big. And he would just follow Ron and I around all over the lake. And then we had the Gorge Junior team, and then he came and he joined us. But he had also come to Maui, and his dad kind of moved over here, and his dad encouraged him to come to Hood River. And then he contacted me. I was in Sestriere at the World Championships. It was a night slalom, and I get my mobile phone rings, and it's Micah. And he's like, hey, would you ever come and do a camp with me? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So we had a break. I came, and then he went to Almanar, had a great result, and then things just kind of catapulted from that. So the long story is, it was Micah. Micah came to me and asked. And Micah was he was like a Massey Ferguson tractor, just an unbelievable workhorse. And he really thrived with accountability and plan and structures. Others, that would be like, oh, too much shock. Levi, that was not Levi's thing. And you had to manage, and I had to make these adjustments. So getting accountability had to be in a different template, So
Yeah.
In order to have the longevity that I've had in the sport and also in the coaching realm, I'm the guy that's got to do the changing. I've got to be able to see, hey, there's a lot more ways to the top of the mountain than just one. There's a lot more waves to the bottom of the wave than just one. And so it's me that I have to change according to what that person and that individual is like and what they're thinking. I have to meet them where they're at now, not go, it's my way, their highway, because I have to make those adjustments, because I will pick and go, there is potential if I can break these things down for them to understand, oh, there's another avenue that I might find more successful than the way I'm going.
And from a competitor standpoint, I can tell you how difficult it is to actually buy into that, because you see certain guys, let's say you're on your way up, you see certain guys doing well, doing one particular thing, and your coach is saying that a different route will be better for you,
right?
And you got to buy in, because if you don't buy in, there's nothing in there, So it's really, it's a really tricky. I think people don't realize, people outside of sports, how incremental those kind of things are, and how different everybody is. You start realizing once you start doing sports, and then you look at, I don't know, let's take tennis. Everybody that's there on top has such a different psyche and such a different physique, but they're all up there, right? I mean, you take Federer, Djokovic, whatever, Basketball, same thing, whatever, whichever sport we want to take. I don't know so much about skiing, but you can probably assess it's quite similar in there. So it's fascinating. I don't know. For me, it's fascinating. So maybe I'll get some insight here from you as well.
I think so much is the tensile strength and the relationship that you have with whoever is going to be giving you the feedback loop. And, as a coach, we get better because we made mistakes. So what I can do, just the other day, I gave some feedback to Kai, and it was just one sentence. It was just a couple of words, and just make this adjustment. No, it's the same. No, I'm telling you, just adjust this. And as he adjusted that comes from just decades of screwing up on my side, trying this, trying that. So it's not necessarily, as you get older, you get more gray hairs, you're able to have you see things with a greater discernment. And I've been fortunate to work with a lot of athletes that have had very steep inclines and that have come back from tremendous damaging injuries to come back and win one more world title after that. And so they can really feel like, okay, I can close the door on this chapter now. And so the ability to have that discernment comes with experience. And there are a lot of really super talented individuals that are in a coaching position. And their learning curve is going to be at that athlete's expense, just like mine was. I had athletes that I had to keep from sneaking out of the room to go be with a boyfriend, hitchhiking in middle Europe to go get laid. I mean, but that spirit is what also got them to the bottom of the mountain faster than anybody else.
Of course.
So you can't snuff that. You can, I mean, there's different athletes that a lot of coaches would be like, why can't they be just like this? That's not them. That's not them. You can't fit them into that mold. But if you make the adjustment as the coach, you can probably take them at least 3 or 4 steps further than you would if you just said, look, this is the program, and we're starting at 7:30, and at 7:45, if you fuckers are late, then fuck you off the team. This kind of thing, so.
The German way. That was a pretty good accent, by the way. Okay, so back to our little timeline of a story. So you get Micah for a boot camp, and then he excels, and then you start working full time, and then you're like, you windsurf yourself, so it's probably easier to break down the sport in that, like, biomechanically, right? What are the movements? What does the guy need? And in slalom, I've talked to a bunch of coaches. In slalom, it's kind of funny, kind of tricky, because you don't maybe see it. Not many, like, people with even a little bit of knowledge don't really understand why the guy has to be big, why he has to be powerful, why does lifting heavy actually help? Like, so you start breaking down those things, and what did you come across? What did you come up with? Like, okay, Micah's, you said he's got skinny legs and whatever, and how does that process even look? Like to come up with a proper. Let's focus more on the strength and conditioning part. Yeah, the mental side we'll get onto that.
So if you have two athletes with the exact same level skill of motor skills, right? And one is 10% stronger than the other. The one that is 10% stronger and has, more range of motion will always have the ability to generate more opportunities for themselves to be faster. That's a fact, and that's a fact I've always respected.
So you reckon there's a straight connection between power and speed on the water in racing?
Yeah.
In surfing racing.
Yes, but again, it has to have an equal motor skills. In other words, the technique, if we're taking that as an equal, if these two things are equal and you add in strength and power and range of motion, this one will always be able to generate. They can risk more. They can get out of trouble faster. They could bury the rail and recorrect. They could, start to purl. They could start to cavitate, and they can pull back. Whereas somebody else has to just let the timeline run until the biomechanics line up so they can get back into shape. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah. But you never get guys with the same level of technique, with the same sailing style, with the same...
Right. So how do you get to that point is you have to find an individual that you can work with that will test with you. And Jimmy Diaz was a huge asset for producing results. I mean, he and Micah trained together a lot, and going just straight line speed, not trying to just testing equipment and testing things. And that's a really humble position to be in. It's really difficult to put your pride and ego aside and just try to stay as consistent as possible with the technique. And then you just see where you line up, And there was one time where I remember it was a pretty touchy situation because Micah said something along the lines, well, usually I'm this much faster than you. And that was pretty offensive to Jimmy. And I totally understand. I'd be pissed too. So, it's like,
Nowadays he admits, but back then, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. But I tell you, in all fairness, a lot of Micah's success and things can be attributed to the work that he and Jimmy did together. I mean, I don't know how Jimmy feels about it, but I would definitely attribute it because they were incredible training partners.
Yeah.
Really, really, really tight.
Did you straight away think like, okay, a team is going to be more successful than working one-on-one with an individual? Or did Micah kind of keep it to himself?
In the racing, in the racing side, yes, because we needed to line up. You needed to, like you had a Pride team, a Gasper team, Simmer, whatever, North, and then, but in the wave sailing, that was something completely different. The wave sailing, that was definitely an individual thing. And I remember seeing Francisco and just, man, that's a lot of pure potential there. But he'd be the first to tell you that, you could go boo in the parking lot. And he could fall water start.
Yeah. So how was that?
I was just like, if he can do as well as he's doing. Sorry.
That's probably the guy that had the most like kind of click with you, that you could see his results just shoot up incredibly when he got a little bit of structure and a little bit of coaching. I mean, resulting in a world title.
His biggest gains were made in self-confidence. That's all it was, and he would have the 4.7 and the mass track at whatever it was, 52 or what, I can't remember. And everything just perfect. I come, loosen the outhole, loosen the foot strap, move the mass track, lower the boom. It's okay, deal with it. I said, you got to understand the plane is really important. You are the pilot, excuse me. The pilot's really important, and you have to deal with it, because there will come a time where you cannot use, I wasn't on the right board. It was this, it was that, but somebody's going to win, and it should be you. So we did so much adjusting and so many things. I've told this story 100 times, and this was I want to say it was in February. And I think we started with Francisco in August. And at that time, I didn't want to change a whole lot of things as the last 2 events were coming into play. And then in February, I said, okay, it's time for competition training. And we went to Waihu, and it was just us. It was just Francisco and I. And it was like ugly, onshore, not exactly big weather, big waves at all.
Europe.
And just us in the parking lot. And so we sat on the beach. He'd gone out, he'd sailed around, he came back, and I said, okay, you've done your warm up. Now it's time to do some competition training. And I said, okay, I want you to just close your eyes, and I'm going to give you, I'm going to set the stage. We're in Silt. You have a private wave coach, first time in history. You have expectations from all your sponsors, and your peers are like, who is this? Why is this guy even here? He's an idiot. Da, da, da. And I just poured it on. And I matched him up against, I don't know, let's just say I matched him up against Nick. And I said, okay, you know what Nick does, and he's like this, and he's like that, so you have to be able to do this, and you have to be able to do that. Now go out. You have a two-minute transition, and come back. And this is a pretty personal thing. And he went out, and it was disaster, complete disaster. I could have done better than him. And he came back in, threw his gear on the beach, and I was laughing, and he was crying. Literally, I was laughing, and he was crying. I can't believe you're laughing at me. And I'm gonna go, you have no idea. Your mind is so powerful. We're not in Silt. You're not against Nick. There's nothing. But yet I was able to speak into you. You absorbed it like a sponge and created all these scenarios and created a hostage situation, paralyzed yourself. You couldn't even tack. And all I have to do is give you the script. You'll be a world champion. And, there were a lot of other things that were said, and I'm not going to share those. Those are very personal. But that was the beginning. And I spent more time with Francisco that year than I spent with Rhonda. He spent more time with me than he spent with his wife Tamara. And we were 6 days a week. And it was through that he gained confidence, the consistency, to know that he was making a deposit every day into that confidence account, that he could be on the big sales, be on this. And there was another time we were down there, and we opened the doors. I said, bring a 6.0, bring the production board. And I made him go out, rig the 6.0 production board, go out to the buoy, and you had to do forwards. And Josh comes rocking up, and he's like, what is this idiot doing? I'm like, oh, he's just doing forward. Oh, this is ridiculous. This is going to be funny to watch. And he came in, boom, 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 2 on each tack, boom, 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 all the way in, because that's what we wanted to do. I was like, look, if you can do forwards on this over and over and over again, when we go to Pozo, it's just going to be boom, boom, boom. It's going to be staples. It's going to be like Kai doing 360s now. It's just you have to do them. You got to pay your dues. You got to do it sometime. And the contrast from going from this, barge in comparison to what he was used to, and this, this spinnaker of a sail, and do that. It was, So anything else after that is going to be a cakewalk, right?
So with a guy like Francisco, you recognize straight away that it's pretty much all mental, and that it's
mental, but it's also emotional. We're like living creatures, in the sense that feelings get hurt, feelings get motivated, and it's knowing which button to press. And I can't do that without making some mistakes and going too far or too much and that kind of thing. I remember one time he came to the beach and we were in Sprex, and he was like, oh, this fail is done. And I go, you fucker, you haven't even changed one batten. You haven't changed one mast top. You haven't done anything. And you're already throwing a towel in. We've got so much work to do. He was like, okay. And we started a relationship that we could be, really transparent.
So from that morning in Vallejo that you mentioned to being world champion, was that the same year, or
No, I think he was third that year. He was third.
Still.
I think he was third that year, and then the next year was the win. And I think Francisco's biggest compliment probably came from Bjorn when he said we could have had 10 wave events and you would have won this year. Because I think, what did we end up, 2 or 3? I can't remember. Yeah, I think we had 3. I think it was Pozo, Silt, and Mo. Oh, Ireland. No. Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember. The guys remember all that stuff. I don't remember. I remember in Ireland, it was phenomenal. Lalo was with us, and we had practiced changing gear in the middle of a heat. We'd practiced it. And I said, look, you got to go out there. You got to nail the double. I know what gear you need for it. And you got to come back in and change the wave gear after you nail that one. And this is in the middle of the heat. And he did it like clockwork. I mean, it was like an F1 pit stop. It was phenomenal. And then and so he went on to win. And we were the last ones off the beach. I can't remember the guy's name, but when we came back, they were ready to take the trucks to the airport, and they were so friggin' mad at us. You guys should have been here an hour ago. We just got off the beach. We just, what are you talking about? When we went, it was like 2 5-0s, 3 5-0s, 3 4-7s. We had all these things rigged because, he was going to break stuff. So we wanted to be ready, and he had the gear, so why not rig it? So, between Lalo and myself and Francisco undoing everything, we could never make the truck in time. And
yeah. Wow.
Fun times.
Yeah, that sounds great. And the incentive of him, just his results just showed up like straight away, right? So so that was probably easy to believe in. But how many times did you get something from a professional sailor, especially wave sailers or maybe surfers, maybe Kai, whatever, you would say like, okay, here you I don't know, push your hip a little more or whatever, and he'd be like, what do you know? Like
Never. Not once.
Never.
No. If they did it behind the car.
Yeah, because I saw, like, I remember in some old movie there was like your footage and you talking from behind the camera and breaking down film and then I saw on your Instagram also, even now, with Kai, I mean, what he's doing is mind-blowing, but you were still analyzing his flips or whatever he was doing, like on a tow board or on a strapped surfboard or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's gotta be fun though.
I love what I do.
Yeah. Is it like you also work with skiers, with basketball players, with whatever, NFL guys?
Yep.
Whatever, you worked with a ton of different athletes. Is it like I don't know, you go in the gym with I saw you worked with Joachim Noah from the NBA Center, and then you're like in this gym, and do you go like, shit, I miss the beach?
No, not at all. It's just when you're working with a racehorse that has the same kind of passion. It doesn't matter if it's a tennis player or a race car driver or whatever. And I'm not an expert in any of those things, but I can still see areas that are just huge opportunities to make great gains in.
Yeah.
I could be lucky to hit the backboard.
Yeah.
Right. But I can tell biomechanics by my eye, not by 600 pages of a textbook.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun working together. So it was good.
Yeah. So the MPG, the Maximum Performance Group, it kind of formed itself, with Micah, Jimmy, Francisco, Daida. More and more guys and girls came in. And like, did it get to a point where you had to like refuse? Because it was obvious, the writing was on the wall. You guys would rock up, get results, be super professional on a stage that at that point probably wasn't that professional. Even though the money was probably much more there than it is now, and now it's like uber professional.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Did it get to a point where you had to like refuse people to join because you were, you were already
No,
set,
not so much. There. I think at one time I had 21 guys that I was training.
Wow.
At one time,
Yeah.
but they were all different facets and different levels. There was the core group, and then there were others that would come in for a little bit, and then they'd go home back to wherever they were from and that kind of thing. But I think professionalism is, I would just say, accountability in a lot more areas. Some people would say, I'm just as professional because I'm making the money, I'm keeping my sponsors happy. What's not professional about that? That's fair, I would just say that, we held each other accountable in areas that others were not holding each other accountable for, whether it was, you got to sleep when you don't want to sleep, you got to eat when you don't want to eat, you got to train when you don't want to train. Everybody can do it great when you're hungry, tired, and really excited to train. But there are other times we have to go out we went out, victory at sea, just full on closeouts. And I'm like, at some point it's going to happen, whether Japan puts another event on in Omaizaki or Niijima, you got to be ready to go through 15-foot shore break, and that's what I saw and I experienced. And that's confidence. Hey, if we go out there, there's nobody here, and you break some gear, no big deal. But if you go out and you don't, and we end up with one heat that's like that, we had some pretty tough stuff in silt. We had hailstorms, freaking hailstones as big as golf balls coming down on us. I remember we were doing a figure 8 slalom and having to run everybody's gear up the beach. And, because we didn't train in a hailstorm here, but we trained in really heavy rain sometimes, that was a little bit of a boost for each one of the guys that we were working with, just because they knew they could, the fair weather guys were at their home, hot toddies. So.
Yeah. But was there a risk of killing the love for the sport of these guys? I mean, we're all in there because we love the sport, not because we want to be millionaires or whatever. And you're telling the guys like, hey, you got to train in 12 knots onshore closeouts with rain, what's up with that,
Because I could set the stage and say, listen, not everything is like, Kipa, where it's just like, perfect weather, you got your car parked, the truck's here, the girls are there, I said, this is a Cinderella story here, but where we go in Europe, you guys know it's not like that. You go to Pozo and it's dust central, and you're full of dust in your teeth. It's just, it's hard, And so, in order to get them accustomed to it, we needed to get out of our comfort zone. And when you have a team kind of atmosphere, it's like, okay, you can do it, and you push each other.
Yeah.
So, and you find fun in that.
Yeah. I'm really curious about that. I kind of touched on this earlier, but windsurfing is so unique in the way that, let's say today you planned to do heat practice with the wave guys, or the slalom guys, they go testing their gear, or they do race training, whatever. But the conditions don't materialize. So you got to freestyle a little bit, like, okay, we change the plan, or we tweak, or we adjust, or whatever. How tricky is that? Because with every single strength and conditioning coach that I know, or with every coach really, it's like, okay, we got to make a plan and try as much as we can to stick to the plan, and today you're doing conditioning, the next day, whatever, lift weights, here's your sailing, but then the conditions don't align, so you got to switch that, and you got to, you don't want to lift too heavy after you sailed, and whatever, it's like, it's all. So how challenging is that, and how, I mean,
that's where the fun is. And that's where I always have a plan, but I have no problem adjusting the plan. No problem. I mean, the guys can walk in and I know within 3 seconds what I've got. That's how good a relationship I have. I don't even have to ask, how's your body? How you feel? I don't even have to ask. I'll ask, but I already know the answer. So I may already have my plan and adjustment. And I go, no, we're going to go on the one wheel. You know, there were times where we had a plan and the conditions, piano, they were just completely flat. What do? We did the old high school rolling on skateboards. Try to create projection and try to be more dynamic, go goofy foot, go regular foot. Now we do stuff with the glasses and one wheels on the slalom course here, you know, just in the backyard. Then we do a lot of contrast stuff where we make things 10 times more difficult than it actually is, and then take it away, and then we do it, you know. Meaning in the sense of, okay, I want you to jump blindly with one eye completely closed and this other one fluttering open and like this, and you've got to do a tuck jump to a 360 to a back jump into the mini tramp. Yeah. Okay, now open both eyes and do the same thing. It's like, you know,
easy. How do you squeeze? I mean, it's also a battle of, from my experience, it's like a game of compromising, because ideally you'd like to, you know, lift weights 3 times a week, do conditioning 3 times a week, do, you know, proprioception, do like some, you know, coordination and balance stuff and whatever twice a week or 3 times a week or whatever. But, you know, you got to sail. This is priority number 1, right? So how do you, I mean, I'm probably asking some secrets, you know, but how's the challenge of fitting all that in, you know?
Yeah, I don't have it doesn't even cross my mind. It's just like I wake up in the morning and I just have to adjust. And a lot of people get trapped and they get held hostage by not being able to do their plan. So they're very rigid. And so there may be 2 or 1 or 2 athletes that can stick with that kind of a rigidity. But the advantage of having some fluid and being able to give that enthusiasm to the athlete to let them know, hey, we're doing the right thing in this circumstance. Meaning, like, let's just say I have a plan and we're going to do tons of eccentric loading. We're going to do lateral, you know, bounding movements or something like that. And then he comes in, he's got a sprained ankle or she's got a sore shoulder or something like that. No problem. What we're going to do is we're going to go one-footed right now, and we're going to do some balance exercises. And I'm going to set the stage. So I might say, okay, here we are in such and such a place. And I just want you to imagine, now I want you to be able to do these single leg squats while you're thinking about this kind of thing. So just imagery training. Ridge has started training with us now, and we were doing some imagery. He was doing some imagery training as Kai was windsurfing, and he and I were on the ski. And he said some things, and I have to help him make some adjustments, because in imagery training, you got to find success. You can't be like, oh, show me that one. You know, no, this is imagery.
Yeah,
you got to be successful.
Yeah, you don't
okay,
imagine
start with a little smaller way.
Yeah,
you know. So,
but you're saying
so
things about adjusting and being flexible and whatever. But rumor has it you didn't actually let the guys sail on Sundays. That's pretty rigid.
Yeah, because I needed a fresh racehorse. I needed somebody with an appetite. You know, I worked with one national team, and they were 110% consistent at 65% effort. And I'm like, I would rather have 110% effort at 65% consistent, because we need to get past this thing. And part of it was culturally, they didn't want to show up another teammate. So we kind of had to split some things up and make some adjustments. Yeah. So.
Yeah, interesting. That's interesting. Okay, let's do a little spill the beans type segment. You worked, as you say, with a ton of windsurfers. Micah, Jimmy, Francisco, Daida, Robbie Swift, Polakow, Lenny, Ross Williams, Brauzinho, just to name a few.
Nick, Josh, Arnon.
Yeah, just so
Peter Voltwater.
Yeah. um, who in like the best to like trying to compare the guys? Who worked the hardest?
Who worked the hardest? It depends how you define work the hardest, but I would say that Micah was the most consistent, and Francisco was a close second. But I also, in all fairness, I had the longest history with them in the original days. And then I have to also give credit to Kai, because he's been with me since he was like, whatever, 11, you know? And each year we take a little bit bigger chunk of his time and a little bit bigger chunk of his time. So, yeah, I mean, and other guys could work really hard. You know, Swifty lived with us for a while. We had, you know, he was 15, 16, and we went through those maturing years of stealing cars out of the rental fleet. I mean, there's all kinds of stories. And oh man, was I pissed. We had fun though. And he got, I remember he had unbelievable success in so many different things. And there were times where he would just, that's it. I'm not going to slalom race. I'm just going to do waves. Because like you were talking about earlier, you know, you needed the size. And in all fairness to him, it was like Eric Tiemme, you know, I mean, it was only so much he could do. And that's when the weight vest came in, and Alan Cadiz, and, you know, some of these smaller guys, Rafael Sals, they all had, you know, weight vests, but it was pretty hard to compete with, you know,
yeah,
some bigger guys, right?
I mean,
you
Swifty,
could do it. But
Robbie Swift, what he did for slalom, I was starting right when he got really into it, and he was like, what is he, like 175 cm, like 5'8", 7", I don't know. And
all I can tell you is Robbie can come into a gym, look at the dumbbell rack, and blow up. He just has to look at it. He could do 3 workouts and he'd be like, well, you know what? I stay a little bit stiff right now.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible, the transition. And then back to, you know, slimming down for wave sailing again, and and dealing with all
we had to keep him on the pink weights. He just there's no way. Brazinho, he had a year with us, and when Francisco won, he went from like 163 to 182, and
in pounds.
But he had really long levers and really made some huge gains.
Yeah.
Brazinho, I think he probably found that he leaned out when he stopped working with us. He leaned out, and I think he found himself feeling better about it. But I think, given the opportunity, if circumstances had been different with the timing of where windsurfing was, the world economy, and MPG, that things would have manifested differently. We just probably went, in all fairness, for Brazil, I think he probably agreed. I think he felt a little too heavy.
Yeah, a little too strong, almost.
Yeah. Well, not too strong. I think he just.
No,
I think he felt like.
Yeah.
I think basically, if you have a certain muscle mass, and then you gain some muscle mass, and then you say, no, I always use a 4.7, probably not going to work. Now you need the 5.0. Oh, but I like the 4.7 better. Okay, I'll lose weight and I'll feel more comfortable in the 4.7. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So making the adjustments according to the current physique that you have.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit maybe easier with slalom sailors, because they're the bigger, the more powerful you are, the faster you're probably going to go, as long as you can keep some sort of mobility and range at your size, right? If you're like under 6 foot tall, you're probably not going to feel great at, like, you know, whatever it is, like 100 kilos. So that's what, like 230 pounds or whatever, right?
Right.
I mean, you're probably,
you know, a guy like Jason, he never really gained a lot of mass, but he gained a lot of power. So if anybody was ever on smaller equipment than anybody else, you know, for a guy his size and stature, he always chose a smaller kit than most would.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, but then like you say, in wave sailing, you just gotta feel good. There's probably very little data and very little, how you say, like the perfect body type or whatever, right? You just got to feel good. So that's where it's really, really tricky. And navigating that, I mean, got to be a bit of a headache, but yeah. So then spilling the beans part 2, who was the laziest?
Who was the laziest?
Yeah.
I can say that Levi enjoyed his sleep. He enjoyed life at a different speed, and that was him. And he has absolutely found his way. Because if you look at the later years and what his career has done, I mean, the guy is unbelievable. And I wouldn't say he was because that's kind of accusational. I would just say he really enjoyed life at a different speed. Yeah. And that's where he performed his best. He couldn't be something that he wasn't, you know what I mean? And his later years as the tour changed and accountability and responsibility changed, and he really got into the production stuff, super motivated. He's down there at the beach all the time. And so you can't say that's lazy. He just marched to his own beat, and more power to him. He did a great job. He was a phenomenal athlete. Competition really at that time wasn't really his thing, and that's okay. I think a lot of other people wanted it for him. And he just had a different appetite for something. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And if you look at what he's done for the sport and for his sponsors and for his own performance, it's very, very respectable.
Yeah. You can't, how you say, you can't fit a square peg into a round hole, or the opposite, or whatever. Yeah. Just that tour, that onshore port tack tour, if you're not having fun, it's very hard to perform, I think.
There weren't too many days that Levi wasn't having fun by the time we got there, you know what I mean? But he came, he participated, I just say that his biggest spurt came after MPG, in all fairness. It was a really good environment for him to be around. I think that he could have been distracted or been engaged in something that would have been really distracting for him. I think it was a healthy time, but his harvest came later in years, and I mean, it's obvious he's done great things. So
yeah. For a guy like Kai Lenny, that is obviously a freak, but you say you've worked with him for such a long time. Like, he does so many sports and he does so many things, travels around so much. How much can your actual input be in terms of, I mean, you gotta, prepare him for surfing, for sailing Jaws, for sailing, like, what do you think your actual input can be? I mean, it seems like there's almost, what we said, it's compromise where the guy wants to, go, I don't know, stand up and then go do this and go do that, and then the training has to adjust, right? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, I don't look at it as a compromise. I look at it at what's the priority, where do we need to be. This year was unique in the sense that because of COVID, for the first time in our whole working relationship, we had a building block time, and so we've seen a significant increase in his health, in his power, and in his maturity to know when to rest. And before, because of the multiple sports and the accountability being pulled for different sponsors, have to go here to the mainland for this tour, to shake hands over here, to do this, to do that sort of thing. My responsibility is to manage that gas tank. And so very challenging to make many gains, but very, very easy to do a lot of damage if I go, no, we're going to train like this, and then we're going to go every single day and like this kind of thing. So, but we have to, my job was just to manage the fuel and making sure that we had some rebound effect from what is that we chose to do, and also that it added to his level of confidence. So we communicate on a lot of different levels, whether it's on earlier days, it might have been even some basics of business. It could be relationships. It could be confidence. It could be, should I go here and do that? I think that's going to be a really big asset for a year from now. Can we adjust that schedule and make it go here? So not just, the strength and conditioning, it's probably, in all fairness, it's about 25% of what I offer. This is just a house to do it in. I mean, I don't have, $400,000 worth of, cable equipment and this and that and this. I mean, we've got steel, and I've got, Bosco platforms, and I've got lasers, and I've got this and I've got that, but it's still, it's a small part. It's about the dialogues and the tensile strength of the relationship and the trust, and, making the adjustments that the athlete feels a sense of confidence comes from it, versus just going, well, I just thought I should go over here because they told me to. It's like,
yeah,
everything has a price and a cost, and it's like, okay, this is going to have a return for you. It's going to be immediate, but there's a consequence. So it's just simple math. Let's look at the math. Where's it going to yield the biggest return for you?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Dealing with travel and all that. And
yeah.
you think like, oh, I'm going to land and I'm going to put in a workout, and then you don't feel like it. And then whatever. And then you're stiff, and probably you should do mobility, and then you go and lift weights, and then what? It's just like, so.
Right. So we have all these menus, pre-travel, what we're going to do, post-travel, as soon as we land, all those things are in place. And we've tweaked them over the years as to, what works well for you. And if you have that plan and you get there and they tell you your room isn't ready for 3 hours, don't let it rock your world. You just leave the stuff in the car and fold the seats down and take a nap, and be okay with that. Because if you start to be held hostage and labeling these things as negative, that really clouds your vision of, what it is that you're trying to do. And those that can find fun and enjoyment and not get knocked out of balance, those are the ones that are going to have the clearest vision of, being able to stay on task as to what it is that they want to do, whether it's have fun or whether it's, win, or, however you want to do it. People can say, well, you have to have a goal. Okay, you can have a goal, but forget the goal now. Now we need to do, what do we need to do in order to get there? Forget that part. We had when we worked in, Olympic cycles, you counted the days, you counted the hours. I could put it all together. Look, you have 27 hours total of gait time. What are you going to do with it? So you got to understand, this is your training course. From here to here is the warm up to the start of the training course. You got the training course, and then you got another 70% down here. So if you're only concentrating in this little section right here, and you've got 70% included on the top and the bottom, the simple math is 70% will always be a stronger skills execution. So if you're kind of just la-di-da and not focused on it, you're repeating an unwanted skill. Does that make sense? I mean, if you go out on the water and you're just like this, and you're not really like, okay, this is what I want to do, and you're not doing it.
Intent.
You go all the way out,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. The intensity has to be there, and you've got to put it up, and then you've got to give it a rest so you can have a rebound, so you can come back with that same kind of intensity. And your goal is to be able to maintain that intensity. And I would say that the best person that I've ever worked with that's been able to have an on-off switch for intensity and still maintain the ability to be like competition ready at any time was Nick. He could go from like, I've got to be ready. I got to be ready. Okay. They called it off. Okay. And then he could be telling jokes and having a great time. And then he could change back. Somebody else, and I'm not saying that's right or it's wrong, and somebody else, they have to maintain full engagement the whole time.
Or you got to work on triggers. What something that triggers you, or a routine, whatever. There's a lot. Yeah. And I think
so. When you maintain that intensity, it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
And you haven't like let's just say there's a big wave contest, and let's just say we're out here at Piahi, and there's no sets. If you're maintaining that intensity, you're just sitting in the water or sitting on the ski, and I got to stay focused. I got to stay focused. I got to stay focused. You're draining your system at a certain point unless you have a protocol in your own brain of how to recharge. And that recharge could be from imagery training, could be thinking of your girlfriend or your husband, or, you know, it could be talking to your best friend. It could be telling stories. It could be anything, but it's knowing yourself really well to know what you need to do. And you find those things out through feedback from, you know, debriefing and planning and stuff.
No, the intensity thing is really interesting because from my personal experience, like sometimes we would do like 15 training heats a day, and then you would go and do a contest and you would do 2, and you'd be even more exhausted, right? Because it was on, off, whatever. The heat got called off, or, you know, the heat prior took 5 times to get done and whatever. And, you know, battling with that intensity and whatever. So that's, that's super.
And so
important.
having that plan on how to rebound, it's a very special individual that can do that all on their own.
Yeah.
And so working together with somebody, whether it's your training partner or, you know, your coach, or, you know, some really close person that knows you really well, and being able to go, oh, you know what, I do better when I do this, this, and this. Okay, well, have that confidence and do that, because a lot of times somebody gets to a competition and they try just a little bit harder, or when you're in the training, your intensity is at 80% because you know you're going to train all day long.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I'd rather.
Who in windsurfing did you meet that was like that? That in the weight room, on the bike, in the water, even in training, wasn't necessarily all that great, and then the contest would come and he would just be like so much better. Maybe not because he was better, but maybe because he kept his consistency and the other guys kind of dropped off a little bit, you know, or maybe he really turned it on. I don't know. Who did you?
I think there's 2 people that come to mind, and one of them is Julia Mancuso. She was, you know, arguably for a long time, up until maybe yesterday, one of the leading, you know, the most winning for world championships and Olympic medals. You know, she could win an Olympic medal, but not win a national championship. And she could rise to the occasion. I think there are a few people who enjoy competition as much as Kai. He really, really loves to compete. And a lot of, you know, that he really thrives with that, the sensation that he gets in anticipation of having to perform on demand. You know, there were different circumstances. I think everybody has their own window, and you have to respect that. You know, it's like, okay, so if I judge it by, okay, who worked the hardest and who did this and who did that, that's not really fair, because at the end of the day, the bottom line is the finish line. I don't care if you do it, you know, training a certain way. It doesn't matter to me. If that's the way that works best for you, I have to respect that, and I have to help support that system until there's something else better comes along.
Yeah. And for somebody, maybe his potential just topped out, and he's doing it at 100%, and got to be happy with that, right? I mean, that's also another thing.
You know, I think a lot of times what happens is, if you look at the lifespan of a professional athlete, where it was 40 years ago, you know, people retired at 25. Literally, it's like, well, you know, 26, you know, kind of done. You're not even into the maturity part. You look at how many people have been late bloomers in alpine skiing right now because of the funding for the U.S. ski team and stuff like that. There are a lot of guys that went to university and did 4 years. Look at Ridge. Ridge has already got a degree. He's in business and everything else, and he just had the wave of the day the other day. You know, barreled, backflip, done, finished. And it's really exciting because here he has a level of maturity and an appetite now and a level of confidence that maybe a few years ago, let's say 15 years ago, the world was, oh, it's time for him to retire. He's always got his education, he's done. Well, he's just warming the tires up. He hasn't even scratched the surface, So the life of the professional athlete is leading into the 40s now. You look at NFL, you look at those things, and those guys, they get their butts kicked all week long and got to come back and start all over again in the season. You look at NBA guys and how much of a beating those guys take. They're on the road, they're sleeping in different beds, they're doing all these different things. So the maturity of learning how to compete. Levi, look at Levi. Look at how much he's improved in his later years here. He's still climbing. It's pretty exciting. Whereas before, people would say, okay, that's as far as I could go. So it's going through the plateau.
But it sounds like you link that with more mental approach rather than the improvement of physical training and nutrition.
Oh, 100%.
That's great.
Yeah, it's if you have the appetite and the resilience to go through a plateau that somebody else is telling you are finished. It happened to me. Somebody told me that I was married before, and she basically said, you have to choose me or this. It was a pretty personal thing. And I chose her, and it backfired. So I'm really adamant about athletes that, if you want to keep going, freaking keep going. Because you just might have a breakthrough in your maturity about how you look at things. Because oftentimes it's like, and this would be competition related. And again, I mentioned Levi a number of times, and even Swifty, what he's doing and stuff. So, it's maturing through those growing pains of getting better. A lot of people hit the wall or hit the plateau and they stay on it for, say, 16 months and they go, well, I guess I'm done. And they could try something different. They could associate themselves with different people. They could, get a new girlfriend, get a new boyfriend. Find a new sponsor, anything that could reignite them to give them like, oh, I could do this. Have somebody that's going to believe in them, or somebody comes in and just says, days of thunder. You've got a set of tires that are set, stacked, and staggered. You can drive on through. It's just, somebody that goes, really? I could? Yeah.
And the examples, I think, and somebody showing you that it's possible. The Brady's, winning at 43 or whatever. Kelly Slater on tour at 48. Antoine Albo, what is he, 48 as well? Whatever, So like these guys, and I think then you start maybe believing it's possible, right?
There are those comeback guys, like you said, you use those guys as an example, but they were world champions before. So they have a sense of self-confidence. Okay, I get injured, 2 or 3 years, a little bit stuck, boom, I can come back. I have a lot of examples of those where guys have come to me, whether they got a divorce or they got into trouble with drugs or whatever. And it's like, but they had a history before. What I'm kind of talking about is those that maybe didn't have that history, but they had the skill set, but they just couldn't find the right button to push for the maturity to perform on demand.
Yeah.
And so they get frustrated, like, why does this always happen to me? How come I did this? And da-da-da-da. Oh, this is what happens, da-da-da. And I'm like, okay, change your paradigm. Look at things through a different lens. What is it that you're going to adjust and refine and really go after that's going to give you an opportunity? Because, they say, continue to do what you did, continue to get what you got. So make some adjustments. And I think that professional sports, the lifespan of that professional athlete has, with the advance of sports science and health and nutrition and athlete management, has just exploded, as far as what can be done.
Yeah. Why did MPG kind of, in the windsurfing terms, sort of shrink? Is it purely due to the economical kind of climate, or is it also because what you've done was revolutionary 20 years ago in the sport, and now it's much more accessible, or to some extent, more accessible. What do you think it is?
Sure. So I would say that it was a time in history where the economics had a huge impact. There was a conglomerate that came in and bought, I believe, 7 of the brands. Everyone's salaries were fully stripped and fully exposed. And as a result, dropped down. Athletes didn't have the funds and the support that they had. They couldn't do it. And then I had to find a way to navigate and, make a living as well. So with limited resources, limited athletes, and then I had to provide. And so I wasn't able to dedicate the time, and I had some serious financial commitments that I had made in order to create MPG. We had a big house on the beach, on the golf course, and we were in close proximity, and you gotta be able to support that. And with the athletes, and I was really focused on that windsurfing industry. And, I had a couple of skiers, but those were momentary. Those were only, 8 to 12 to 14 weeks chapters here and there, really kind of spotted, and that wasn't enough to support it. So with the salary caps, with the economic turndown, and the financial needs that needed to be met, I had to create the other avenue of things.
Yeah.
So, but as you can see, if you look around here, it's still alive well, and I still bring in athletes from all over. I still very much my passion. I love coaching, whether it's, Sebastian Vettel has trained with me.
Really?
We've had he came years ago. He was a Red Bull athlete, and we did all kinds of hikes and running around, and we had a great time. He has a great sense of humor. So I've had some pretty big icons. I've had NFL players and NBA with Joakim, and we've had some great times. None of those guys were like full-time like MPG, but it's still, that's my passion. I really, really love coaching. I love pursuing excellence. I love pursuing the finish line, and I like to do it with people that are of the same like-mindedness. And you find that common ground where you can really dig in and have a lot of fun, and working hard and winning is fun for me. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean grinding and just it's not that. Working hard can be, no, you got to go sit in a hyperbaric chamber for an hour and a half. What? That was sitting still is hard, So, but it's just. And utilizing all the resources that I built over decades, whether it's with sports science, with blood panels, with internal medicine people, with Navy SEAL guys, and pulling from all those resources, track and field. It's just a lot of fun. It's something that I can come home from being on the water, and my kids know. They're like, "Whoa, Papa had a good day today,"
Yeah.
So that's a pretty cool spot to be in life.
Did you find a common denominator for all of the world champions, that you just something maybe inside them, inside their psyche, inside like some sort of, I think in windsurfing, one thing that all these guys have in common is just they love to sail, to windsurf. They just love their craft, like they love the process. But between sports, between disciplines, whether it's Seb Vettel or skiers or windsurfers, surfers, whatever, one common thing that champions you would attribute to:
an insatiable appetite. They just love what they do.
Hungry.
But they really are truly in love with what they do. Whether it's going fast in a car, or hitting in a football game, or putting the basket, or windsurfing and just a bottom turn like nobody's business, or a slalom start like never before. a skier on a basketball turn, they just love what they do. They just and it's that love that inspires, they motivate themselves. It's just like, oh, I can't wait to get on there, on the wave, or just send it down the line. And then, just the feeling that they feel, whether it's the tennis player who's peeling the hair off the top of the ball, just those things. But it all comes down to love. They love what they do. They're very passionate about it.
Yeah.
And that's contagious.
It's incredible. It's incredible, Scott. I was preparing for a full-on gym strength and conditioning, reactions, balance, coordination, whatever, squatting, bench pressing interview, and it's like turned into a totally, that's great. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. But two more fitness things. You trained Olympic skiers, NBA players, NFL players, Formula One drivers, whatever, the whole lot. Where do windsurfers rank there in terms of fitness overall? I mean, there is things you can measure, right? There is strength, there is cardiovascular endurance, there is different things.
So each sport,
because we get shit for not being fit, So that's why I'm asking.
But each sport has their respective needs. Slalom racing doesn't necessarily have to have. You don't have to be able to do the splits. It helps if you spin out and your back foot comes out of the strap. It helps, but it's not necessary. Big wave tow windsurfing, you better have some eccentric power to be able to hold the G-force in the bottom turn. Race car drivers, they have to have an incredibly stable core and the ability. If you look at the physique of those guys, they don't look like a gymnast. They don't have massive delts or anything. They have a body more like Polakow. Pretty lean in the legs, but solid. And everybody has their different needs, and so I don't compare one to the other. I don't say, well, like I remember somebody accused Micah of being chubby at the beach when we were in Pozel. How come you got the belly there, guy? And Micah just kind of looked at him. You see how windy it is out there? And he just kind of smiled and carried on. Each sport has their need, and so you can't do it. I mean, the guy that's
it's hard to talk to those hardheads, like, you should have a six-pack, man, I'm out there on the beach for like 8 hours with very little nutrition. That fat just gets me through the day. It's heavy.
Yeah.
It helps. I mean, it's not heavy compared to muscle, of course, but it helps with keeping the weight. It helps with so many things, and like, you don't look like an athlete.
I think one thing that's really important is when you like the scientific part, is to have a very strong hormone profile and a very strong immune system. And so there's all kinds of different feedback loops that are out there now that you can buy online. The ring thing, for my sleep, my readiness, my heart rate,
the aura ring,
these kind of things. You check your blood, like guys at Red Bull, you go in the morning, they pull the vials of the blood, and every set you do, they click the ear, and things change, but they're always looking at those things. And, I remember we had one U.S. ski team racer that came, and he went and got tested in Austria, and the guy told him, okay, you've got to train like this for 2 years before you're going to be any good. And I'm like, we ain't got time for 2 years right now. So we just changed up the program, and he needed a can of confidence. He needed a case of confidence, and he went on to win races. So you can't get stuck in one thing is what I'm saying. And having those assets of being a happy person, because that generates great chemistry. If you're not happy, boy, it's uphill all the way,
Yeah.
So, and that athlete that can find happiness in a rainstorm and going out through 15-foot shore break, they're going to go a long way in life. And it's just changing your perspective. And it's like, and like I said, right in the very beginning, finals are going to be won in subpar conditions in anything, whether it's in a car race, a sailboat race, or, you know, an NFL game, or windsurfing or ski racing. You know, Julia won her medal in home-like conditions, you know, in Torino, where it was, you know, flat light and kind of, she was at home. You know, it's just like, this is, I grew up with this, you know, because she would go out, and it's not like, oh, you know what, I ain't staying inside and have hot cocoa. You know, the coaches would make it fun. Okay, we're going to go ski in the tree wells, you know, and who can ski you know, we used to do stuff where, you know, it was a powder day. You couldn't train on the hard snow. So what do? Take one ski off, two poles off, block one lens with stuff the tissue in, and throw 360s and just have fun.
Yeah.
And but the whole time you're becoming better at your sport, because your nervous system is getting used to adjusting. Oh, I don't have the stability of the ski pole. Oh, I don't have both eyes. I can't see those things. And it's the same thing in windsurfing. You know, go out there, and, you know, there's been times where guys would be like, okay, so I'm going to go out and sail on a door, literally. You know, I think there's a video of Mike from years and years ago sailing on a door. You know, okay, move the fin back 8 inches. Okay, put a slot fin on. Okay, just mix it up. Give yourself some feedback so you can have a much greater appreciation for what you've got. Who was it? Somebody grabbed somebody's old board from the old days back in 2000 or whatever and went out on it. I think it was Ricardo. Ricardo just grabbed a board, you know, and you get some ideas. Oh, that feels pretty good. Yeah, you know. So anyway, getting a little off track, but
no, but it's really cool. It's really cool, and I wonder, with all these, you know, things that you do, one eye here. I mean, I try to sail in those strobe glasses as well and stuff, and like, how many times have you been called crazy for all these things? by the hardheads?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot more times than I know about, I'm sure. But I don't know.
Yeah. One last boring fitness question, and then I let you go. What would your best advice for like an average Joe windsurfer, you know, to be able to just go out there and enjoy his sailing, you know, 50 times a year or whatever an average windsurfer does?
So if it's you know, if you're a wave sailor,
job, right? Let's say you have a desk job. Let's say you have a desk job, and okay.
So got to have forearm power, because the forearm power is what's fun. If you come out of the jibe, you're not planing. You got to be able to pump. Getting a little overpowered, you know, forearms. Those are usually the first, you know, if you're talking about the desk jockey, because they're like, you know, they go out on the weekend and they're not going to be able to have as much fun because, you know, they run out of gas, and it's usually the forearms, you know, because maybe they don't have the right sail, it's too big or it's too small. They don't want to go back in because they only got out here for a few hours, so they're muscling it. And if you're going to muscle it, you got to have power in the forearms.
Yeah, so that's the number one advice. Yeah. Listen, that was, like, for me, that was really cool, because that's a lot what I'm doing at the moment. So that's really cool. I expected a really, you know, a really rigid routine type army thing, you know, and you gave me a really beautiful scope of, you know, I guess the holistic approach is probably the term. And, I really appreciate.
I think you nailed it on the head there, because this center here is very much everything under one roof, meaning that if somebody comes in and I have a plan and I go, oh, you know what, your right hip flexor is really not very good. No problem. I can put them on the table. I have a skill set that we can release adhesions and things like that. I can use different modalities to help. And then we can make the adjustment and say, okay, no, we're not going to go lift right now in that capacity. We're going to work on the range of motion. We'll use some body weight. Okay. And we can make those adjustments. Whereas another facility might say, oh, you have to go see the chiropractor. Then you have to go see the ART guy. And then, go over and do the hot tub and the sauna. You know, and then come back and we'll do squats. But we have all of this under one roof, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Well, now after this interview, if we are ever able to travel again and I'm in Maui, you definitely,
oh yeah, come visit
there.
for sure.
Definitely.
We'll have some fun.
Sounds great. Appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much. Hopefully I gave you a little bit of a platform. I bet there's like 50 more things you could tell me and whatever, but
oh, there's plenty of stories.
yeah.
But one thing I would say is I really am grateful for all of those athletes, from the guys right from the very beginning that had faith and committed themselves and the time, their resources, and shared their passion with me. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for those guys.
Yeah.
For all of those guys, through the guys in the very beginning and sort of where I am right now. Yeah. So I still love what I do. The appetite grows. It just continues to increase.
Yeah. And we appreciate your input into making our sport.
Oh, thanks. All right.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
All righty. Take care.
So there we go, a very interesting podcast there. Give us a thumbs up, like if you liked it. Let us know in the comments below if you've got anything to say. Let us know who else you'd like to hear on the podcast. And I have to say, we are trying to get the windsurfing women of the world on the podcast. It's proving more difficult than we thought, but stay tuned. We will be bringing you some of the stars. So stay tuned to the channel. Subscribe if you've not already subscribed. Podcast every Wednesday. Thanks a lot. See you next time.